Hello, my people. I'm back. And if you've been with me through this series, you know we've been dismantling the hypersexual mask. And the first two truths kind of showed you that sexuality can be armor and that physical intimacy without emotional vulnerability isn't really real connection. Now here's the final truth that's going to kind of hit the hardest. All right. The thing you've built your entire identity on is temporary. And what happens when it fades will either destroy you or force you to discover who you actually are. So let's finish this. The third final truth about the hypersexual mask is this. When you're building your worth on sexual desirability is building on quicksand. That's what it's like, because desirability fades, trends change, and when the attention stops, you're left facing the person you've been avoiding underneath the mask. And here's the reality nobody wants to talk about when we're celebrating hypersexuality as empowerment. If your value, I should say, is your sexual appeal, your worth is temporary. And if your power is your desirability, your power has an expiration date. If your identity is being sexually wanted, your identity is dependent on other people's attention. And that attention is conditional, changeable, and ultimately just unreliable. You might be getting attention now. You might be, you might feel powerful now. You might feel valuable now. But what happens when the attention fades, when trends change, when you age, when your body changes, when people stop responding to your sexuality the way they used to? What happens when the mask stops working? Because here's the truth about building your identity on external validation. It's building on quicksand. It really is, because it feels so solid when you're standing on it, but it's constantly shifting, constantly unstable, and eventually it will sink. And if you think about Megan Thee Stallion's position right now, she's at her peak of her career. She's getting massive attention. She has power, influence, visibility. But she's also watching the cultural shift. She's seeing younger women come up behind her. She's seeing trends change. She's seeing that the hot girl persona that gave her her power is also a trap, because it's temporary. It's exhausting to maintain, and it's keeping her from being seen as anything beyond that. And of course, at some point, whether it's, in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, the attention will shift. The culture will move on. The hot girl era will end. And then what? Who is Megan P when she's not Megan Thee Stallion, the hot girl? Who is she when the mask comes off? What's her value when it's not based on sexual desirability? Those are the questions that every woman wearing the hypersexual mask will eventually have to face. And if you haven't built an identity beyond the mask, if you haven't developed worth beyond your sexual appeal, if you haven't created value beyond being desired, those questions will devastate you. Because when you think you've made your entire, when the thing you've made your entire identity starts to fade, you're left with nothing. Think about it. No sense of self, no internal worth, no identity beyond what other people actually think. So real talk, comment now. Have you ever thought about who you'd be if you couldn't use your looks or your body to get attention? Like if that was taken away tomorrow, would you even know who you are underneath? Comment, who am I? If you've built so much of your identity on being desired that you're not sure who you'll be without it. Yeah, and think about the woman who built their entire identities on being hot girls, on being sexually desirable, on getting attention for their bodies. What happens when they age, when their bodies change, when the attention slows down, when younger, hotter women take their place? If they've built their worth on being desirable, they're going to feel worthless when the desirability fades. If you've built your entire power on attention, they're gonna feel powerless when the attention stops. If you've built your whole identity on the mask, they're going to have an identity crisis. When the mask stops working. if I can speak. And this is the trap of building your worth on anything external. It's conditional. That's what it is. It's temporary. It's out of your control. Because real worth, the kind that sustains you, that grounds you, that makes you feel valuable regardless of external circumstances, has to come from within. It has to be based on who you are, not what you look like, on your character, not your body, on your authentic self, not your performance. But when you've been wearing the hypersexual mask, you haven't been developing your authentic self. You know, you've been developing the performance. You've been building the mask, not the person underneath. And when the mask stops working, when you're left facing someone you don't know, someone you've been avoiding, someone you've been hiding from yourself and from everyone else, you know, think about your own relationship with your sexuality and your worth. If you couldn't use your looks, if you couldn't use your body, if you couldn't use your sexual appeal to get attention, what would you have left? And that's a real question. What would you have left? Who would you be? What would your value be? How would you feel about yourself? And if the answer to those questions make you uncomfortable, if it makes you feel scared, if it makes you feel like you have nothing, that's the sign. That's a sign that you've built your identity on quicksand. Because your worth should be independent of your looks. Your value should exist regardless of your body. Your identity should be rooted in who you are, not in how people respond to you sexually. And if it's not, if your worth is dependent on being desired, if your value is conditional on attention, if your identity is the mask, you're in danger, big danger, because the mask will stop working eventually. The attention will fade. Desirability will change because trends change. And you'll be left with a choice. Desperately trying to maintain the mask, you know, get surgery. This is where surgery comes in. Perform harder, chase younger trends, fight against the inevitable of finally you take the mask off and face who you actually are underneath. The first option is exhausting, painful, and ultimately futile. You know, you can't stop time. You can't maintain the performance forever. You can't build your worth on something temporary and expect it to last. You know, the second option is terrifying, but also very much liberating. Taking off the mask means facing the wounds you've been avoiding, confronting the pain you've been hiding, discovering who you are beyond the performance, but it also means freedom, real worth that doesn't depend on external validation, real power that comes from knowing yourself, real identity that's rooted in authenticity and not performance. If you think about the women in our culture who are aging out of the hot girl era, who built their identities on being sexually desirable and are now watching that desirability fade. Some of them are fighting desperately to maintain it through surgery after surgery, performing harder, trying to stay relevant in a culture that values youth. And you can see the desperation from miles away, the fear, the panic of watching their identity slip. Others are finally taking the mask off, you know, finally discovering that, you know, they are beyond their sexuality, finally building worth that's internal, not external. And you can see the relief, the authenticity, the freedom, and of no longer really having to perform. The difference between those two paths is whether you've built your identity on the mask or on your authentic self. If you've built it on the mask, aging will terrify you. You know, change will devastate you. The loss of attention will feel like the loss of yourself, literally. But if you've built it on your authentic self, aging will free you. Change will be growth. The loss of attention will reveal what was always there underneath, your real worth, your real power, your identity, your real identity. Here's what nobody tells you when they're celebrating hypersexuality as empowerment. Empowerment that's dependent on other people's validation isn't really empowerment, it's performance. Think about it. And performance is exhausting, temporary, ultimately empty. Real empowerment is knowing your worth regardless of external validation. It's having that power and it's having power that comes from within, not from attention. It's having an identity root in who you are, not how people see you. And you can't really get that while you're wearing the hypersexual mask. I wouldn't even say really, you don't get that. You can't get that, because the mask is designed to get attention, not to develop authentic self-worth. Yeah, it's designed to perform power, not to cultivate real power. It's designed to create an identity based on external validation, not really internal knowing. Think about Megan's trajectory. You know, right now she's powerful because of the attention, the persona, the performance. But that power is conditional. It's dependent on maintaining the mask. It's temporary. Real power would be knowing your worth regardless of attention. I'm going to say that again. Real power will be knowing your worth regardless of the attention. Being rooted in who she is beyond the hot girl persona. Having an identity that exists beyond the external validation. You know, and the tragedy is that the trauma she experienced, you know, the shooting, the betrayal, the public humiliation could have been the catalyst for that transformation. It could have been the moment she took the mask off, you know, faced her wounds and discovered her authentic self. But instead, you know, she went back to the mask, back to the performance, back to building her identity on the thing that's temporary, conditional, and ultimately unstable. And, you know, she'll keep performing until the mask stops working, until the attention fades, until the culture moves on. And then she'll face the same choice every woman wearing the hypersexual mask eventually faces. You know, keep fighting to maintain the performance, or finally take the mask off and discover who she actually is underneath. This is the third truth. Building your worth on sexual desirability is building on quicksand. Desirability fades, trends fade, trends change, attention shifts. And when the one thing you've built your identity on starts to crumble, you're left facing the person you've been avoiding underneath the mask. The mask gives you this temporary power, but prevents you from actually developing real power. You know, it gives you conditional worth, but prevents you from discovering authentic worth. It gives you an identity based on performance, but prevents you from actually knowing who you are. And eventually, the mask will stop working. The only question is, will you have built anything underneath it? Or will you be left with nothing when the performance ends? That's the third truth, guys. You know, your worth can't be built on what's temporary. Now, in the final part, I'm giving you the path forward, how you actually take the mask off, how to heal the wound underneath, and how to build real worth that doesn't depend on being desired. Part 5 is the solution, all right? So don't miss it. And as I always say, guys, stay beautiful, stay connected, and stay conscious in this field.